Much is being made of the potential of green hydrogen as the fuel of the future. And while this is undoubtedly an important direction of travel, carbon offsets and carbon insets, as demanded by customers, are a more immediate factor. There's also talk of signing up the Science-Based Targets initiative. In reality, new factors are coming into play all the time, but these are being addressed by new solutions, powered by improved data flows and, once again, optimism. I'm going to move on to new factors, or what new factors are coming into play in the sustainability toolkit. For example, green hydrogen. We've discussed this a fair amount today. Please tell us how you view this opportunity specifically, and how can buyers best deploy a more intelligent approach to the selection and operation of their equipment fleets?
It's a great question. Again, especially with like green hydrogen and other technologies, I think I've seen Jeremy speak to this really well in the past. It's still also unclear exactly how that is going to play out, as we talked about before, on specific locations, specific sites. And if I take a bigger step back, it's really the biggest transitions we'll see is just how all of this energy is produced, because there's different kinds of hydrogen, as we talked about. I mean, depending on how you define green hydrogen, and so on and so forth. For us, again, we end up becoming, because of that uncertainty, and the need to really get that pencil out to make careful choices depending on the job, the workflow you have, the site location you have. We're more about, again, trying to think about how do you optimize for any of those solutions. And for me, it's getting down to what we're seeing is customers, and Henrik can speak to this really well, I'm sure, in Europe, but we see it in the US and other parts of the world. Customers are just having to get smarter about understanding their carbon footprint and how they're going to be able to reduce it, because it turns out that who they're building for at the end of the day is starting to demand it. Whether it's federal agencies and other things, they're starting to require people to be able to report on that carbon or the carbon emissions they have, and how they can compete to reduce that compared to other contractors. It used to be price, as I was talking about. Things used to be always quantified in terms of price, but now carbon is part of that equation so that people can provide competitive bids for new projects. And one of those interesting aspects to me is when we're starting to quantify that through the accounting. And I think a big trend that is going to hit this space that other industries are adopting faster is around thinking about carbon offsets and insets in the sector. So how do you work as a whole construction site so that you can think about a net zero asset, whether that's a building or a piece of infrastructure? And you have to think across from design to operate, or to site operations to the long-term operation, to be able to do that, to quantify it all and understand, is it net zero? And to make that happen, you have this quantified carbon reductions that you're producing through that supply chain overall in that ecosystem, which would be quantified as an inset, and then thinking about, do you have to buy offsets down the road? And so getting more sophisticated in industry about how we think about carbon insets and offsets, I think, is going to be a really important part of the economic equation going forward longer term, especially as more and more companies join the Science-Based Targets initiative, and as we see more and more federal agencies in different countries around the world requiring us to be thinking about net zero future.
Jeremy, do you agree? A more sophisticated industry, is that what's required?
Yeah, and I think, coming back to the hydrogen economy, the green hydrogen economy, obviously that's one that we have a lot of interest in as a company. Definitely are investing and believe that's going to be a critical part of the solution out in the future, especially in the part of the market that we serve. We are medium duty, heavy duty construction. A lot of that stuff is going to be more suited for hydrogen than probably some of the other alternatives that are out there. I think we're a little bit uniquely positioned for that to take off in the future with some of the investments that we've made. So, hydrogen generation through electrolysis, we've invested in companies and have that capability, and have talked about that in the public. Fuel cells, combustion engines, how are you going to consume that, as well as those tanks and other investments that we've already referenced earlier. So I think we're very well positioned, very much interested in that taking off. I guess thinking about how that plays out in the field, again, I think it's going to be the timing and how quickly some of these things come along is really going to be the question.
Henrik, What new factors are coming into play in the sustainability toolkit in your opinion, and how can buyers best deploy a more intelligent approach to the selection and operation of their equipment fleets?
Yeah, we start with the hydrogen, and I think absolutely, as we talked about here, it's an interesting thing here for the future thing. I mean, it's the problem is to store electricity normally, so to say, and I mean we have wind and solars and so on, and then the difficulty is to store it, and then of course the hydrogen can also then be used directly then into combustions, as Cummins talked about there, Jeremy, and so on. So that is a great opportunity then. And then, of course, we can use it in fuel cells and so on to get electricity and so on. And you can also actually think about to have power containers, so to say, in places where you don't have the electricity, but you can actually then get hydrogen to the place and you produce electricity to the machines if you have electrical machines on the work site since earlier, or that's also an opportunity. Then I think green hydrogen is also then an opportunity, for example, to produce fossil-free steel. So that is also an opportunity for that. So I mean, hydrogen can be used in different ways to be CO2 free in the future.